Keanu Reeves was sitting in a Burger King in Seattle, savoring a rare moment of peace under the soft patter of rain, when an 8-year-old boy clutching a broken toy plane shuffled up to him and whispered something in his ear. Instantly, Keanu's face drained of color, and he reached for his phone to dial 911. What unfolds next will tug at your heartstrings and leave you speechless. Stick around for a story of courage and compassion you won't forget. Before we dive in, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and if you love stories that inspire, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow, we've got another incredible tale waiting for you. Keanu Reeves leaned back in the stiff plastic chair of the Burger King, the faint hum of the restaurant buzzing around him as he unwrapped his burger. He'd just come from a long day at a local community center, where he'd spent hours with kids who reminded him why he kept showing up for these charity events. Their smiles, their resilience, their unfiltered hope. Exhausted but content, he'd decided against heading straight home. Instead, he'd pulled into this small, unassuming spot off the highway, craving something simple, something normal. Dressed in a black hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, he blended in, or at least he tried to. For Keanu, moments like this were rare, a chance to step out of the spotlight and just breathe. He took a bite of his meal, savoring the quiet, when he noticed a pair of eyes watching him from across the room. It was a boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting at a table near the window. The kid had messy brown hair and a faded green jacket that looked a size too big. In his hands he clutched a toy plane, its left wing snapped clean off, held tight against his chest like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Keanu caught the boy's gaze, wide, curious, but tinged with something heavier, something that made the actor pause mid-bite. He offered a small, easy smile, the kind he'd perfected over years of dodging paparazzi and fans. But the boy didn't look away. Instead, he seemed to study Keanu, his fingers tightening around that broken plane. Next to the boy sat a man, tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a suit that screamed money and control. The guy barely glanced at the kid, his attention locked on his phone, his jaw tight as he muttered something into it. Keanu couldn't hear the words, but the man's tone carried an edge that set him on alert. Keanu went back to his food, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. He wasn't one to overthink a stranger's vibe. He'd met too many people, seen too many stories play out in his line of work, but there was a tension in the air he couldn't ignore. He took another bite, letting his mind drift to the kids he'd met earlier, their laughter still echoing in his head. That's when he heard the soft shuffle of sneakers on the tile floor. He looked up and there was the boy, standing right beside his table, close enough that Keanu could see the frayed hem of his jacket. The kid's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the toy plane, his eyes darting back toward the man at the table before locking onto Keanu's face. Keanu set his burger down, turning fully toward him, his instincts kicking in. "Hey, buddy," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "What's up?" The boy didn't answer right away. He shifted his weight, glancing over his shoulder again, like he was checking for permission or maybe making sure no one was coming. Keanu followed his gaze. The man was still on his phone, but his posture had stiffened, his eyes flicking up briefly before dropping back to the screen. The boy leaned in closer, his small frame practically vibrating with nerves. Keanu tilted his head, softening his expression, trying to put the kid at ease. "It's okay," he said gently. "You can talk to me." The boy swallowed hard, then leaned in so close his breath brushed Keanu's ear. His voice was barely a whisper, shaky and small, but the words hit like a punch. "He hurt my mom. She's locked up. Please help." Keanu froze. The air seemed to thicken around him, the casual chatter of the restaurant fading into a dull roar in his ears. He looked into the boy's eyes, pleading, terrified, and way too old for someone so young, and felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. This wasn't just a kid with a wild imagination. This was real. His hand moved almost on its own, slipping into his pocket to pull out his phone. He kept his face calm, years of acting kicking in to mask the adrenaline spiking through him, but inside, his mind was racing. He'd heard stories like this before, too many, really, but hearing it from a kid, seeing the fear up close, made it different, made it personal. He dialed 911, his thumb steady as he pressed the call button, but his eyes never left the boy. "Stay right here," he murmured, his voice firm now, protective. The kid nodded, clutching that broken plane tighter, his small body shrinking closer to Keanu's side. Across the room, the man looked up again, his gaze narrowing as it landed on them. Keanu felt the weight of that stare, cold and calculating, and knew this wasn't going to be simple. He'd stepped into something bigger than a quiet meal at Burger King, something that went deeper than he could have guessed. The operator's voice crackled through the phone. 911, what's your emergency? And Keanu took a slow breath, keeping his tone even. I've got a kid here who says his mom's in trouble. We need help, fast. As he spoke, he kept the boy close, his free hand resting lightly on the kid's shoulder. He didn't know the whole story yet, but he didn't need to. The fear in the boy's whisper, the way he clung to that busted toy like a lifeline, told Keanu everything he needed to know. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was a call for help, one he couldn't ignore. The man at the table stood up, adjusting his jacket with a slow, deliberate motion, and started walking toward them. Keanu's grip on the phone tightened. Whatever came next, he was ready. The air in the Burger King shifted, growing thick with an unspoken weight as Keanu hung up the phone. The operator had promised help was on the way, but the seconds stretched out, heavy and slow. He crouched down to the boy's level, his knees brushing the cold tile floor, and looked into those wide, frightened eyes. "What's your name, kid?" he asked, his voice soft but steady, the kind of tone he'd used 100 times on set to calm a nervous co-star. The boy hesitated, his small fingers digging into the broken toy plane, its jagged wing pressing against his chest. "Liam," he finally whispered, so quiet Keanu had to lean closer to catch it. "Okay, Liam," Keanu said, nodding like they'd just made a pact. "I'm Keanu. We're gonna figure this out together, all right?" Liam's gaze flickered back to the man across the room, Victor, Keanu would later learn, who was now standing, his phone pressed to his ear, his sharp eyes locked on them. Keanu followed the boy's look, sizing up the guy, tall, polished, exuding the kind of confidence that came with money and control. The suit said power, the glare said danger. Keanu's gut twisted. He'd seen men like this before, men who thought they owned the world and everyone in it. "Who's he to you?" Keanu asked, keeping his tone casual, though his pulse was anything but. Liam swallowed hard, his voice dropping even lower. "My stepdad, Victor, he hurt my mom. She's locked in the house. He said no one's gonna find her." The words landed like a brick in Keanu's chest. He froze for a split second, the image of a woman trapped, helpless, scared, flashing through his mind. He could picture it too clearly. A door bolted shut, a voice silenced. It hit him harder than he expected, stirring up memories he usually kept buried. His own childhood hadn't been easy. Watching his mom struggle, powerless to fix things, the kind of ache that never really went away. He shook it off, forcing himself back to the moment. Liam needed him now, not some ghost from his past. "Did he say anything else?" Keanu pressed, his voice still gentle but firm, like he was coaxing a secret out of a friend. Liam nodded, his eyes brimming with tears he wouldn't let fall. "He said, if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never see her again." Keanu's jaw tightened. He glanced at Victor, who was pacing now, his movements clipped and deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. The guy radiated control, but there was a crack in it, something desperate in the way he kept checking his phone. Keanu knew the type. Rich, connected, untouchable. The kind of man who could hurt someone and walk away clean because people were too scared or too paid off to talk. It made his blood boil, the unfairness of it. How many kids like Liam were out there, stuck in shadows no one bothered to look into? How many mothers like Emily, he assumed that was her name, piecing it from Liam's shaky words, were left to fend for themselves because the world turned a blind eye? He put a hand on Liam's shoulder, light but steady, grounding them both. "You're brave, you know that?" he said, meaning every word. "Takes guts to tell a stranger something like that." Liam blinked up at him, the toy plane trembling in his grip. That broken wing? It wasn't just a toy, it was everything this kid had left, a symbol of a life cracked apart by someone who was supposed to protect him. Keanu felt a pang deep in his chest, a mix of anger and something softer, something protective. He'd spent years playing heroes on screen, but this was real. messy, raw, and right in front of him. Victor hung up his call and started toward them, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. Keanu stood slowly, positioning himself between Liam and the approaching threat, his posture relaxed but ready. He'd been in enough fight scenes to know how to look calm when he wasn't. "Everything okay over here?" Victor said, his voice smooth, too smooth, like oil over broken glass. He flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes, stopping a few feet away. "Liam's got a big imagination. Hope he's not bothering you." Keanu met his gaze, unflinching. "He's not bothering me," he said evenly. "Just showing me his plane. Looks like it's seen better days." Victor's smile twitched, a flicker of irritation breaking through. "Yeah, he's clumsy like that," he said, his tone sharpening as he glanced at Liam. "Come on, kid, we've got places to be." Liam shrank back, pressing closer to Keanu, his small body tense. Keanu didn't budge. "Think he wants to hang out a little longer," he said, keeping his voice light but his eyes hard. "Kids need a break sometimes, right?" Victor's expression darkened, his hand flexing at his side. "I don't know who you think you are," he said, stepping closer, "but this isn't your business." Keanu held his ground, the warmth he'd shown Liam replaced by a quiet steel. "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm making it mine." He could feel Liam trembling beside him, the boy's fear radiating like heat. Victor's wealth, his power. It didn't mean a damn thing to Keanu. He'd seen enough of the world to know that money could buy silence, but it couldn't erase the truth. And the truth was screaming in Liam's eyes, in the way he clung to that busted plane like it was his last shred of hope. Keanu's mind raced. Cops were coming, but how long would it take? Could Victor pull strings, make this disappear? He'd heard the stories, abusers walking free because they knew the right people. It gnawed at him, the thought that Liam might slip through the cracks like so many others. He crouched back down to Liam, ignoring Victor's glare. "You did the right thing, telling me," he said, his voice low just for the boy. "We're gonna get her out, I promise." Liam nodded, a tear finally slipping free, and Keanu felt it like a knife, sharp, personal. He stood again, facing Victor, who was now close enough that Keanu could smell his expensive cologne. The man's control was slipping, his eyes darting between them, calculating. Keanu knew this was just the beginning. Whatever Victor was hiding, it was bigger than a locked door, and Keanu wasn't about to let it stay buried. Victor's shadow loomed closer, his presence filling the space between the Burger King tables like a storm cloud rolling in. Keanu could feel the shift in the room, the chatter dimming, the air tightening, as the man stopped just a step away, his polished exterior cracking under the weight of his barely contained anger. Liam pressed himself against Keanu's side, the broken toy plane trembling in his hands, and Keanu's heart thudded hard in his chest. He didn't flinch, though. He'd faced down worse than this, on-screen and off, and he wasn't about to let this guy scare him off, not with Liam counting on him. Victor's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping low and venomous. You're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, pal. Walk away now or you'll regret it." Keanu kept his stance relaxed, hands loose at his sides, but his mind was racing. He needed to buy time. Keep Victor talking, keep him here until help arrived. "Just chatting with Liam about his plane," he said, his tone easy, almost playful, like they were old buddies swapping stories. "Kid's got a good eye for detail. You ever fly one of these things?" Victor didn't bite. His lips curled into a sneer and he leaned in, close enough that Keanu could see the faint lines of tension around his eyes. "I don't know what he told you," Victor said, his words sharp as a blade, "but he's a liar. Kids make up stories. You'd be smart to mind your own damn business." The threat hung there, heavy and real, but Keanu didn't blink. He slid his hand into his pocket, fingers brushing his phone, and discreetly tapped out a message to an old friend. Jake, a cop he'd met years back on a film set, someone he trusted. Burger King off the highway, kid in trouble, hurry. He hit send without looking, keeping his eyes locked on Victor's. "Funny thing about kids," Keanu said, his voice steady, "they don't always know how to lie. Not like adults do." Victor's jaw twitched, and for a moment Keanu thought the guy might swing. But then a flicker of movement caught his eye. A young woman behind the counter, her name tag reading Mia, watching them with a frown. She'd been wiping down trays, but now her hands stilled, her gaze sharp. Keanu gave her the slightest nod, hoping she'd pick up on the vibe. Victor straightened, adjusting his jacket with a slow, deliberate motion, like he was reining himself in. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "I've got friends in this town, cops, lawyers, people who'll bury you if I say the word. Whatever he's whining about, it's nothing. You're wasting your time." The words cut deep, not because Keanu believed them, but because they echoed a fear he'd carried since he was a kid. He remembered his mom, her tired eyes, the way she'd shrink when his stepfather raised his voice. He'd been too small to stop it then, too powerless to do anything but watch her fade. That helplessness had stuck with him, a quiet ache he'd buried under years of work and kindness. But now, staring at Victor, feeling Liam's small frame trembling beside him, it roared back to life. "I've heard that before," Keanu said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Doesn't mean it's true." He glanced down at Liam, whose eyes were fixed on the floor, the toy plane clutched so tight his knuckles were white. Keanu's chest tightened. He wasn't that scared little boy anymore. He could do something now, be something more. He turned back to Victor, his expression hardening. "Liam's not going anywhere until I know he's safe. You want to talk about friends? I've got some too." It was a bluff. Mostly Jake was one guy, not a network. But Victor didn't need to know that. The man's eyes flashed, and he took a step closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You're playing a dangerous game, Reeves. I know who you are. You think your little fame shield's gonna protect you?" Keanu felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but he swallowed it down. He'd dealt with bullies before, on sets, in life, and he knew losing his cool wouldn't help Liam. Instead, he smiled, small and tight, the kind of grin that said he wasn't backing off. "Fame's got nothing to do with it," he said. "This is about a kid who's scared out of his mind. You're not taking him anywhere until I'm sure he's okay." Victor's face darkened and he opened his mouth to retort, but Mia stepped in, her tray clattering onto a nearby table louder than necessary. "Everything all right over here?" she asked, her voice bright but edged with suspicion as she looked at Victor. Keanu seized the moment. "Yeah, we're good," he said, catching her eye. "Could you grab Liam a soda? He's been telling me about his plane. Pretty cool stuff." Mia hesitated, then nodded, shooting Victor a wary glance before heading back to the counter. Keanu knew she'd caught the tension. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. Victor scoffed, crossing his arms. "You're pathetic," he muttered. "Stalling won't change anything. Cops around here, they're mine. You're out of your depth." The words stung, planting a seed of doubt. What if Victor was right? What if the system was too broken to help? Keanu's mind flashed to all the stories he'd heard. Kids lost to red tape, families shattered because no one cared enough to fight. But then he felt Liam's hand brush his arm, small and shaky, and that doubt burned away. He wasn't letting this kid down. Not today. Not ever. Mia returned, sliding a soda across the table to Liam, her eyes flicking to Keanu with a silent question. He gave her a quick, grateful nod, then turned back to Victor. "Maybe I am out of my depth," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "But I'm not the one who's scared right now." Victor's smirk faltered, just for a second, and Keanu knew he'd hit a nerve. The man's power was a mask. Crack it, and something ugly lurked underneath. Keanu's phone buzzed faintly in his pocket. Jake, probably, and he felt a flicker of hope. Help was close. He just had to hold the line a little longer. Victor glared, his hands flexing like he wanted to grab Liam and bolt, but Keanu stood firm, a quiet wall between the boy and the threat. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but Keanu wasn't about to let injustice win. Not while he still had a say. Wow, that was intense, right? If your heart's racing like ours, don't miss out. Subscribe now. We've got more stories of grit and grace coming tomorrow. Hit that button and stay with us. The standoff in the Burger King stretched on, the tension coiling tighter with every passing second. Keanu stood unwavering between Liam and Victor, his calm exterior masking the storm inside. Victor's threats lingered in the air, his confidence unshaken, but Keanu felt the faint buzz of his phone again. Jake was close. He just had to hold on. Mia lingered nearby, her presence a quiet lifeline, her sharp eyes darting between them as she pretended to rearrange napkins. Then, through the glass doors, Keanu saw the flash of red and blue lights cutting through the dimness outside. Relief hit him like a wave, but he didn't let it show. Victor noticed too, his smirk fading as two officers stepped inside, their boots heavy on the tile. The taller one, a broad-shouldered man with a badge reading Carter, scanned the room with a steady gaze. His partner, a wiry woman with a tight ponytail, followed close behind, her hand resting lightly on her holster. Keanu recognized the look in Carter's eyes, honest, unyielding, the kind of cop Victor couldn't buy. "We got a call," Carter said, his voice deep and even, cutting through the hum of the restaurant. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" Victor straightened, slipping back into his polished mask. "Just a misunderstanding, officer," he said, his tone smooth as silk. "My stepson's been spinning tales. This guy," he jerked his head toward Keanu, "decided to play hero. No harm done." Keanu didn't bite. He crouched down to Liam, his voice low and steady. "You can tell them, Liam. It's safe now." Liam's eyes darted to Victor, then to Carter, his small frame trembling. Keanu gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze, feeling the boy's fear like a weight in his own chest. "Go on," he said softly. "You're braver than he is." Liam swallowed hard, clutching the broken plane, and stepped forward. His voice was small but clear, slicing through the room like a blade. "He hurt my mom," he said, eyes fixed on Carter. "He locked her in our house. He said he'd take me away if I told anyone." The words hung there, raw and unshakable, and Keanu felt a lump rise in his throat. 8 years old, and this kid was carrying a burden heavier than most adults could handle. Victor laughed, a dry, hollow sound, but it didn't reach his eyes. "He's got an imagination," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "You're not seriously—" Carter cut him off, raising a hand. "Let's hear the rest," he said, his tone firm. He knelt down to Liam's level, his voice softening. "Where's your mom now, son?" Liam's lip quivered, but he held it together. "At home, she couldn't get up last time I saw her." He wouldn't let me help. Keanu's stomach twisted, the image searing into his mind. Emily, trapped, alone, fighting to protect her son. He stood, meeting Carter's gaze. "He's telling the truth," Keanu said. "Check his bag. Might find something useful." Carter nodded to his partner, who moved toward Victor's table where a sleek black backpack sat unattended. Victor's calm cracked, his voice rising. "You got no right." But the female officer unzipped it, pulling out a small notebook. She flipped it open, her eyes narrowing as she read. "Dates, times, addresses," she said, holding it up. "Looks like a plan to move the kid out of state. Mentions keeping E under control." Carter's jaw tightened. "That E your wife?" he asked Victor, who went silent, his face paling. Keanu felt a surge of vindication, but it was drowned by the ache for Liam. This wasn't a victory yet, not until Emily was safe. Carter radioed for backup, his voice clipped. "We've got a possible abduction and assault. Send a unit to the address in that book." He turned to Victor, pulling out handcuffs. "You're coming with us." Victor lunged forward, snarling. "You don't know who I am," but Carter and his partner pinned him against the table, cuffs clicking shut. Keanu shielded Liam, turning him away as Victor spat threats, his polished facade shattering. The restaurant watched in stunned silence, but Keanu's focus stayed on the boy, whispering, "You did it, Liam. You saved her." Minutes later, Carter got word officers had broken into the house and found Emily, bruised and weak but alive, locked in a basement room. Paramedics were rushing her to the hospital. Keanu didn't hesitate. "I'll take him to her," he told Carter, who nodded, trusting the resolve in Keanu's eyes. The drive was quiet, Liam clutching his plane, staring out the window. Keanu kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the boy, a silent promise. At the hospital, they found Emily in a stark white room, an IV in her arm, her face pale but her eyes lighting up when she saw Liam. She pulled him into a sobbing embrace, her voice breaking. "My baby! You're okay!" Liam clung to her, tears soaking her gown, and Keanu stood back, his throat tight. Emily looked up, her gaze locking on Keanu. "You're the one who helped him," she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You saved us." Keanu shook his head, humble as ever. "Liam saved you. He was the strong one." She wiped her eyes, whispering, "Thank you," over and over, and Keanu felt the weight of it. The kind of moment that made everything else fade away. But then a nurse mentioned something that stuck with him. Neighbors had heard Emily's cries before, but stayed silent, terrified of Victor's influence. The injustice of it burned in Keanu's chest. How many others had suffered because no one dared to act? Victor was gone, hauled off in cuffs, but Keanu knew this wasn't the end. Emily and Liam were safe for now, but the scars ran deep, and the system that let this happen was still broken. He watched them hold each other, a fragile reunion, and felt a quiet resolve settle in. He'd gotten them this far, but there was more to do, more to fight for. Liam glanced at him, offering a shy, shaky smile, and Keanu returned it, knowing he couldn't walk away, not yet. A month later, the soft hum of a community hall in Seattle filled the air, as Keanu stood off to the side, watching Liam fidget with the edge of a small certificate. The room was packed. Cops, locals, a few reporters, all gathered for a ceremony honoring the boy's bravery. Liam, now 8 but looking taller somehow, stood next to Emily, who'd regained her strength, her eyes bright with a quiet pride. Keanu kept his hands in his pockets, his hoodie swapped for a simple jacket, blending into the crowd as always. But his focus was on them, mother and son, healing together after everything. He'd been there every step since the hospital, checking in, bringing groceries, making sure they weren't alone. It wasn't enough, though. Not for him. The mayor finished a short speech, pinning a young hero badge on Liam's shirt, and the room erupted in applause. Liam ducked his head, shy under the attention, but Keanu caught the flicker of a smile. Emily squeezed her son's hand, whispering something that made him nod. As the crowd thinned, Keanu stepped forward, crouching to Liam's level. "Proud of you, kid," he said, his voice warm and steady. Liam looked up, then reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Keanu without a word, his small fingers trembling just a little. Keanu unfolded it, a crayon drawing of 2 figures holding hands, a repaired toy plane between them, scrawled at the bottom in shaky letters, "My hero." Keanu's breath caught, a wave of emotion crashing over him. He looked at Liam, then Emily, and saw the trust in their eyes. Trust he hadn't earned in a day, but over weeks of showing up. He straightened, the drawing still in his hand, and made a decision he'd been wrestling with since that night at Burger King. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone soft but firm. "You two, you're family to me now. I'm not just walking away." Emily's eyes widened, a tear slipping free. "Keanu, you've done so much already." He shook his head, cutting her off gently. "I got a place lined up, a little house, nothing fancy. It's yours if you want it, and I'm sticking around, not as a guest, but as whatever you need me to be." Liam's face lit up, and Emily covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. It wasn't just money or a roof. It was a promise, a bond forged in that chaotic moment when Liam had whispered for help. Later, as they left the hall, Keanu pulled Carter aside. "I'm starting something," he said, "a fund for kids like Liam, ones caught in messes no one else sees, calling it the Liam Fund." Carter grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Reeves." Keanu shrugged, deflecting as always, but inside he felt it, a spark of purpose. Back at the car, Liam hugged him, sudden and fierce, and Keanu hugged back, the drawing tucked safe in his pocket. Emily watched, smiling through tears, and Keanu knew this was more than a rescue. It was a new beginning, for them, and for him. The Liam Fund launched quietly, but word spread fast, offering shelter and hope to kids trapped by violence. Keanu stayed close to Liam and Emily, not just a savior but a constant, a real hero, not in cape or script, but in the quiet, steady way he chose to care. And every time he saw that drawing, he remembered, kindness didn't end with saving someone. It grew into something bigger, something lasting. What strikes me most about Keanu's journey here is how it challenges us all. Could we step up like he did, or would we hesitate, assuming someone else would handle it? I think his choice to go beyond a single act of kindness, to build a family and a legacy with Liam and Emily, shows that real heroism isn't just in the moment, it's in the long haul. Maybe you agree, Or maybe you think he overstepped, turning a rescue into something personal. Either way, it's a story that sticks with you, right? Thanks for joining us on this ride. Your support means the world. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Keanu's shoes? Hit that like button if it moved you, and subscribe for more stories that spark hope and debate. See you next time.